You know what this reminds me of? It's all those video games, which almost any video game has some form of escort, protect the NPC mission, and they're not too bad on any difficulty usually, as long as you're not playing on the absolute hardest difficulty with permadeath enabled. And once you get into that territory, those missions become the most eye roll you are dreading playing, because even if the rest of the game is relatively okay for you, the moment when you lose one of your party members, or you have to protect someone who can't protect themselves, it just becomes so hair-pullingly, why am I playing this? But you know what, we gotta do it for the achievement, we gotta do it for this or that. And that's more or less what DanMachi just did to our boy Welf here, because he's a pretty talented fighter. It's not like he's incapable, hell, he was the reason why they actually survived that one attack where he used one of his flame blasts in order to get rid of the enemies. But when you basically say, hey, we have no weapons, we have no real equipment, and I need to forge right now, and when you start forging, given how this dungeon operates, it's like a human body. When the human body's sick and has viruses, our natural antibodies and stuff will go and try to fight it off, and that's basically what the dungeon does. If you're in a location, it will send multiple enemies at you to the point where it feels overwhelming. So the fact that you have to protect him, you haven't really rested, your lunch is a cube that's about, I don't know, maybe an inch by inch. It's really not that much. They literally are just so screwed, and they are playing on the hardest difficulty with permadeath enabled, barely any equipment. It's not even like they stacked up prior to the mission. They got no health potions, they got no energy. They're basically already in the red for their health bar, and DanMachi says, hey, now protect your boy, who's one of the rare people who isn't down for the count in terms of energy, but now he has to forge a new blade. This show ain't playing, man. Yeah, I do have a full live reaction to today's episode available on my Patreon if you're interested, so consider supporting if you do want to see that. But yeah, this episode and season in general, man, I'm absolutely loving. And for an episode that barely had any Bell, they made it very exciting. The most we get is just seeing what he's currently doing, and pretty much he's trapped. He can't do too much as Ryu is more or less resting. She's having a nightmare slash kind of a pleasant dream because her familia was all alive, but we see how everything kind of went to hell in terms of they thought it was a trap, but they knew they couldn't let it sit there for someone else to fall into it, and obviously we're getting more and more about what happened there, and it's heartbreaking for sure. But to see our boy just not even have to fight right now because these sheep, they're intelligent enough to recognize that on a 1v1, Bell would end up living. So the fact that it values its own life, unfortunately for Bell, we can tell it'll come back with a couple more. In that case, then it probably wouldn't fall back. But I think the concept of the dungeon in general is interesting because it's not just a setting where monsters are. Instead, the dungeon feels like a creature. It feels like a living being alongside anyone else. And I think the fact that DanMachi goes that direction, which a lot of these worlds don't. They just say, oh, you're going exploring in a labyrinth, or there's these floors and there's monsters. The most intelligent being that you'll fight is the creature and the characters in question, but DanMachi goes that extra mile to make the dungeon a living and breathing person in a way. Obviously not quite as literal, but the fact of the matter is, it understands how to push trespassers away. It knows how to swarm them by making these creatures, and I think the fact that the author wrote it in this way, and the fact that the anime studio is doing just as good of a job at really showcasing that it feels like a body that's trying to fight off intruders. So for us, it's the viruses that make us sick or anything that could bring down our well-being. That's exactly what the dungeon does, but with these monsters. And it's really cool to see because at any moment, any one of these monsters could end up being the next floor boss if it proves itself. You never quite know, right? So the fact that you just have these characters like rushing from location to location, and then you find one person and that one person tells you Bell's dead. I can't blame Boris for saying it because, I mean, from my point of view, it looked like he was. He lost an arm, his neck got snapped, his bones shattered. Yeah, we saw a casting of healing, but honestly, from any logical point of view, that shouldn't be able to be healed. Yes, we know about the scarf and everything now, but from his point of view, it's no wonder he thought that way. And yeah, you know, he's not the most pleasant of characters given some of his dialogue, but you can see the complexity of that entire situation. But the fact that they are just so down in the dumps, I like the way they kind of regroup from that, because here's the thing. If they 100% believe Bell was dead, they have no real reason to try as hard as they are. Would they just sit down and die? No. But the next fight, maybe 10 fights from now, they all would have ended up dead because they don't have the encouragement and drive to believe there's hope and there's that light at the end of the tunnel. But by our girl coming in saying like, hey, did you actually see him die? Did you look at his body? Getting more details, it gives them enough hope, even if it's a sliver of hope. Even if we hadn't already confirmed Bell was okay, And we would realistically be saying, okay, ignoring the fact that he's the main character, realistically he's probably dead, right? So the fact that they're going in this direction to give them that kind of fool's hope, I mean, they need it, otherwise they would all end up dead. And I think that's where Welf comes in, and really, he does something I wasn't expecting. At first, I didn't really realize what he picked up turned out to be ore. The fact that all he needs is a little workshop that he already had with him, a flame, which he has one more flame left in that blade. The fact that, yeah, I mean, we can tell the dungeon swarms you if you're just trying to sit and eat. If you're starting to build equipment that's going to kill the monsters, I imagine there's going to be no hope. You're literally in a trapped environment. They're going to swarm you. They're going to throw everything they have at you. And honestly, it's their only shot because he had one blast left with that fireball. Honestly, it would save them one more time. Or he can use that one shot and basically forge a few different blades potentially that maybe will last a lot longer. He did mention the ore was basically the rares in the dungeon, so you would imagine it has a lot more durability than what they've been using up to that point, given the fact that a lot of their stuff has been a little rickety, a little broken, a little cracked, given how much they've been through over just such a short amount of time. And I like what they're doing, I have to say. I have no idea where we're going to go next week because one would suspect that it would be focused on the blacksmithing side of things, but at the same time, because we have right now 3 different perspectives, we have the rescue party, we have Belle's side, and then we obviously have the rest of the crew's side. So you would expect, given that the blacksmithing seems to be the most important and interesting part right now, that would be their focus. But at the same time, Belle is literally one fireball away from having an entire swarm of those sheep or even the sheep's leader come at them. So maybe they'll focus on something like that instead. But either way, I mean, this season is brutal. I really think it's still just like the death flags are above any character's head at a moment's notice. And even if you know Belle will make it to the end, I mean, seeing some of these characters that he knows and loves, like what they'll be through, and, you know, even if imagining they all get out of this one 100%, they're 100% alive. I mean, this be trauma. This really do be something that is exciting and terrifying. And one of the things that sold me in the first season of DanMachi was I really found the dungeon and its world fascinating. And then season 2, I kind of fell off, and then eventually I got caught back up, and obviously here I am for seasons 3 and 4. But the fact that season 4 is going so into my favorite aspect, which is the dungeon, and then the fact that the characters actually feel like characters, they're actually human, they have these emotions, these complex feelings, it really easily becomes the best season of DanMachi without much struggle, and it was that during its first part. The second part, at this point, I'd say I even like it more. Maybe some people disagree with that, I haven't really talked about it too much, but I honestly think part 2 is even better than part 1 for me right now, given the complexity of the fights, the emotions, and the heartache, and honestly, we'll see where we go. It has been a brutal and fun time, and I do not envy anyone who's playing on this difficulty right now. But yeah, I'll pass the torch over to you. What did you think of DanMachi Season 4, Episode 15? Do let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Ring that bell if you want to get as many notifications to the channel as possible, and like I mentioned, full live reaction is available on my Patreon. And while you're there, you'll also get yourself a video shoutout like Rajvir Malhans, Ranga Rage, and rogueknight are getting today. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.